Give me a sec.
Oh, there I can see everybody again. Phew.
Maybe let's wait for a few more minutes. Couple more minutes.
I'll get the chat thing open up in a separate window over here because I was on a call earlier this week, the one that we were hosting, and I got to tell you what, our chat comments were just blowing up live. All the three different percentages were going on. I can only hope for somebody to say, "No pressure, everybody, if you're a participant, right? No pressure, but I'm ready for you. I'm ready for you." Well, I'm prepared to be able to view your comment. I may not have a right answer to that.
Camilo, we're starting.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. We will start our webinar around modernizing the identity and access management for an AI-driven world, which is when I was discussing with Frank, it was I have Entra ID and now what kind of. So just as an introduction, my name is Alex. I should actually put it in English. I'm Vice President for Business Reimagination at SIA, which basically I help companies promoting and implementing digital transformation and AI transformation. And I'm here today with my good friend Frank from Arrow. Frank, if you just want to introduce yourself for a second.
Hi, I'm Frank Welder with Aero Electronics, and I always tell people I have the best job in the world because I get to talk to people about things that are bothering them, keeping them up at night, and some of the things that they might be able to do from a technology solutions piece. And I have a focus on identity and access and governance and security.
Sorry for interrupting. I was just testing something and it seems that it works. I was checking that the sound was working well, so all good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So we're here today, as said, to discuss around identity and access management. So let's get started. I will call it today, if we do a kind of a reality check, a lot of organization, to not say most of the organization I know, are using Entra ID as the identity backbone. Um, Entra ID is great for basic IAM, is great for SSO for employees, is great for multi-factor authentication, is good for conditional access. But when you get into more modern stuff, what I mean by modern is, for example, doing more than user provisioning in policies. This is where it gets a bit blurry in terms of the line. And this is where I'll call it, a lot of my clients are saying, okay, I have this, and now what? So let's just have a quick look at the what I call the Entra ceiling, where the organization gets stuck. And you may recognize yourself into that. When you're starting to look at adaptive access and continuous authentication, which is beyond the point of time MFA, so you want to have continuous authentication like impersonation and stuff like that, it will become difficult. When you're looking at orchestration around hybrid apps, I mean, I was on project recently with a client where they had their corporate Entra ID, for example, and they had a cloud system and we're looking to basically do single sign-on and user provisioning, all the rest. Yeah, we could define an app, but when it gets to real identity orchestration, which was passing basically all the information so we can retrieve it, this is where we got a kind of a small hurdle there. The other part, I mean, policy portability. Again, if I take this example of my client, was a financial sector client that was having this challenge. One of the thing is, I'm having these policy local. How can you make sure that we implement this in the cloud system? So that was something else. Then when we're looking at privacy, and when we got into the OIDC world, this is where it got complicated because Entra ID being a SCIM, we'll call it a SCIM client, it's not a SCIM server, it basically limits in terms of integration and all the rest. So what do we do with that ceiling? And this is what a lot of my clients have done. They said, let's just add Keycloak into this. Keycloak is cool. I mean, very, very well-known platform, open source, does identity management. You can surface basically Entra ID in there. But, I mean, Keycloak is not necessarily enterprise grade. Why? Because it's community support for mainly. Yeah, there are a couple of flavors that are basically being promoted by corporate companies. Like Red Hat, for example, will have a flavor, they will support it, but it's still, I will call it, not necessarily enterprise grade because they will support the core, but not the integration that comes around it. So basically when you have Keycloak, when you're starting to introduce upgrades, things will break. HANDR becomes your responsibility all of a sudden, as opposed to be using I will call it a SaaS type vendor HANDR. When you need to patch it, you need to rely on the community, which could be okay if you're small, but when you're big, it basically becomes more challenging. The expertise is hard to find and maintain internally. There is customization that you may need to do that will increase your technical debt. And when you're looking at the big picture, it's basically going to slow down your innovation. So in a nutshell, I will call it Keycloak is great for labs, but when you get to enterprise, open source is not necessarily the best option. And this is where most companies, and I include in there even large organization, I know like even government type organization that went into that path, got, I will call it, their foot wet, and then they realized that they were going to the wrong path, and they're taking a step back saying, okay, how do I fix this for real? And what do we need to fix? It's really when we get into the AI that we will see that that gets it, because as you're getting into AI and automation, you will start basically seeing an increase of identity attack, which will require continuous verification. You will have to basically use API trust, not just user trust, which is the impersonation that I was talking earlier. So when you call the database or when you call the API, it's not just your login from the front end that it matters. It's actually the authentication needs to pursue past just the front end. It needs to get back to the back end and even to the database. When you're looking at integrating SaaS services, that SSO everywhere becomes, I'll call it a challenge. I don't know I don't know in all the geography, but in North America, the regulation is actually putting more and more pressure around the auditability and the governance around identity management. You need to be able to provide information around who is accessing the system, when. You need to be able to delete all the data relevant to people, so it makes it more and more complicated. Then you need to look at development when you're trying to integrate these apps all together. How do you build an easy framework for identity pattern integration? And as I said earlier, when you're looking at hybrid application, it will require more than just a token or a unification. You need to make sure that you don't duplicate all the identities and all the stuff together. So that's the context. So we're trying to basically show you, and that's the purpose today. We want to show you basically what the foundation is for a trusted AI world. And from an identity and access management perspective, what does it mean? We want to get to continuous verification, so zero trust is actually being put in place properly. We need these identity and access to be adaptive, AI-driven, because in evaluating the risk. We want to be able to to put unified identity across everything, cloud, on-premise, API, applications, and name it. It needs to be enterprise grade. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck into the support that I was talking about earlier. We need to have strong governance and compliance posture. This is becoming more and more important. I have tons of clients that basically they cannot rely on, they cannot afford basically a data breach, and they cannot, they need to comply to certain regulation that puts them into a very delicate situation. And on top of that, the user experience needs to be frictionless, which means you don't want to kill, especially when you're going to citizen or you're going to consumer like identity. You don't want to put an heavy process that every single time a user wants to access their system, they need to basically sign their life with their blood on the bottom of a sheet, and they need 25 steps to actually do it. And you need to have an enterprise trust IAM platform, which is where, from an IBM perspective, Verify comes into play. And on that note, I will pass it to Frank, so he will explain to us basically the IBM perspective around the IAM world. Frank, the floor is yours.
And thank you, Alex. I appreciate that because you hit on the crux of the conversations that I get to have with customers all across North America when it comes to this. That says, you know what, I am like every other customer in the market, right? I'm expanding. I have multi-cloud associated with it. It's not just this, it's this. So my goal today is just to have a discussion around some of the challenges we've seen other customers have, and then kind of IBM's perspective on where identity really is. And we're going to put this into the framework we started off with. AI is changing a lot of the ways that we do identity on how we consume and use identity. But I also want to take a piece of the part you said earlier, Alex, that said AI should also be used to evaluate the risk that our identities pose in our market or in our space as well. And so before we even talk about any of that a product or anything like that, let's talk about some what I'm going to call just capabilities associated with that. So bear with me here as we use my little virtual whiteboard to talk about some of the things in this area. We know that our identity, the framework, the fabric we have, first and foremost, is going to be designed to be able to support and protect our workforce. Now, more and more in our workforce, there's going to be two identities associated with that. And the two identities that are going to be associated with that are going to be the human IDs, but the fastest growing facet of all workforce IDs has been the machine IDs. Now, we won't focus on that as much today, but keep that in mind that I have to be able to now in my workforce environment, not even start talking about my third-party supply chain and different things. I now have to manage those workforce and human and non-human IDs with that. Let's just keep it in regular human IDs associated with that. So I've got my human IDs and my workforce variables, but many organizations that we work with because of apps and integration and value in the marketplace and all these great drivers associated with that also have consumer IDs. And I took this note down, Alex, as I'm like, oh, am I going to use Entra ID for my consumer IDs as well? Probably not, because you pay for every one of those. And what's the tactic most organizations do? I'm going to get a CSV file or a SQL database, and I'm going to do user authentication and password and verification against that, and I'm going to write some Gorpy stuff with that and with identities and all this other fun stuff. Because that's usually what we get is, in this case, we get an identity and access management system tying back into a directory function associated with that. Great, right? We've seen this, and we're going to be setting ourselves up for world of pain is what I think we talk about with many organizations, is the pain associated with this. Because now what we're start seeing is, hey, you know what? I do have an identity and access management and a separate directory for my consumer side, or multiple consumer or third party and suppliers and over here. And I've got one for my workforce. So now at a minimum, almost every organization I work with is managing two directory structures associated with that because of this. And I said at a minimum because it is going to be more than a minimum, because we also have to include, and Alex, you talked about this right away, legacy applications. We're not all hybrid multi-cloud based upon Azure, AWS, or GCP. We also have legacy data, legacy systems, legacy access management systems that are also need to be managed as part of this, or included as part of our work effort. And each one of those we've seen also carries different support structures, capabilities, identity and access pieces with it. So what we're seeing is, oh, let's not forget that pesky thing called cloud out there as well. And anybody that works in multiple clouds, right? And I'll use the big three. Sometimes I think IBM wants me to put their cloud as part of that as well, but we'll just call it the big three and we'll stretch into the big four with that. Right, so I've got Azure for my Azure for my entry M365, but I've got stuff running out in Google doing this stuff. How does that work in as part of this thing? So now, effectively, many organizations are managing by default multiple directories and multiple identity and access management systems, and then have to design applications or procedures, and there's that P word again, procedures that equal pain for this, because it increases your tech debt, or it makes it so that you can't be flexible when you want to try and change something or add something. Because what we're seeing is many of the applications that are driving these organizations, hey, you know what? They use data or consume data and applications and services from multiple locations, and I have to take that into place. So there's no overarching piece with that. So you mentioned this earlier, Alex, and I love that. The whole goal of every organization, there's not somebody out there. I remember back in the day when I started in this environment, I used to be, am I going to be the systems administrator from HE double hockey sticks, right? Because we all know that systems administrator, right? And we would think that they're out there trying to make it harder than heck, right? But it is trying to be frictionless, because we've found that that's easier than having to write your password down on a piece of paper. So make it frictionless so users don't find a way around it. But it has to be included, and this is where we'd like to be able to make sure that we understand the threat that the IDs have in our environment. And that's where AI comes to help us, being able to say, I can help you, right? The way you're coming in, or how this is being accessed, or the procedures that we're doing this with, introduce this amount of threat, and this is how I can help you with risk management around identity and access. And then here's the one that hurts. I don't have a single view of my identity environment. I couldn't tell you what the interaction of my workforce and my consumer and my machine was in a single view in most organizations with that. And back when I was U.S. Army, and we had U.S. Army, but it was U.S. Army Cyber Command, we used to say to ourselves, you cannot respect what you cannot inspect. And that inspection came as part of the single view into your identity environment with that. And then lastly, this is one we see quite a bit, and you wouldn't think about it, right? We're all geeks having a great time with this. We see many cyber insurance providers now requiring more proof of performance associated with identity and access management with it. Because they're the ones that, if you have cyber insurance, they're the ones paying the claim. So they're like, hey, I'm good. Just like I've got that little thing from the insurance companies that plugs into your car that tells you how you're driving. The cyber insurance people are saying, I want to be able to have a single view and threat management of what's going on before I do it, because otherwise I'm going to charge you more for your insurance, and I'm going to limit the insurance's liability associated with it. So you have to have a bigger risk with that. So that's the kind of the big picture we see that goes along with that. And what the nirvana is, what we really want to be able to help organizations do is first and foremost orchestrate across all of those identity access management systems and subsequent directories associated with that. We're not saying rip any of them out today, right? When it makes sense, do that. But orchestration first and foremost. When I create a user, move it through, and apply governance and lifecycle associated with that. Those are the piece. And don't make it so that I have to jump through 7 hoops to do it, 3 of which are flaming and on fire to do that. We just let's not do that piece of it. So orchestration associated with that. And because of AI as a driver for this one, role-based access controls that AI respects as part of this process, and how we manage those as part of our identity environment as well. That's been the biggest driver we've seen for being able to do role-based access control, whether it's in an on-prem environment, a cloud environment, or a legacy environment, have a consistent set of roles that can be applied across those environments. And then enforcement, obviously, with those as well. And that goes to that part you talked about earlier, Alex, that said constant verification of that role and that identity with that. I think we understand where I stand on legacy apps. Raise your hand. Oh, I've got a legacy app in my environment that I have to continue to provide, and I have to continue to have access associated with. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. That was the interactive portion of our session today. Thank you. You all played along. You're all going to get a thumbs up and there we go. You all get fireworks for that one right there. Fireworks, boys and girls. Legacy apps are driving a huge part of the pain in our identity and access management environments right now. It absolutely is. And then I want to introduce this is not a new concept. It should absolutely not be a new concept. When we talk about that single view capability, ITDR, identity threat detect. Let me try that again. I might have messed that up a little bit. Identity threat detection and response. Identity threat detection and response. That's the part that says, hey, this is what my environment looks like, and these are violations of my security policies around identity and how I manage those, right? So this is bad stuff has happened associated with that, ITDR. The other side of that coin is ISPM, Identity Security Posture Management. What is the risk? And how do I remediate or address that risk to lessen it? And so when you put ITDR and ISPM in the same great sandwich, same type environment, you really are addressing threat detection and posture management. And many organizations are going out there and saying, oh, no, it's one product versus another product, or one way to do it or another way to do it. Clearly, IBM's perspective on this one is that is a single offering. Does not make you choose between those. They have to go together with them. And that's why I put them in a separate piece with that as well. And then, you know what? I don't see this changing too much in the future until we get to a single directory environment. And you know what? That's just, that's in the future. We'd love to get that as a current state. If I was building a business today, I'd be able to do different things to take that, but it's come through acquisition and we put things together, and we have to live with this one, right? So this is part of the pain. Well, let's not make it hurt so much. So being able to have sync and consolidation where appropriate, to ensure that we can do all the orchestration and the controls and include my legacy apps and have my view of that environment with that. And then lastly, I hope it's the last one, I better check my build here, is governance. We talk a lot about bringing people into our directory environment or into our identity and access environment. What happens when we need to offboard them? How do we make sure we got them all? All right, that we've cleaned up the groups that they were part of, or the different things with that. Or how do we do a process that said increase rights or privilege escalation for only a certain amount of time, and then being able to do that. So there's a top-down view of governance, but there's absolutely a bottom-up that says your peers don't have that capability. Why do you? So a review of that and make that programmatic associated with that, and then have to do reporting against that, because Alex, you made a great point. Again, many organizations, regulated industry, not just what were you looking at, when did you come in, how did you gain access, what credentials did you have, were they appropriate to the task you were trying to do with that. And that is all what governance helps us do into that environment. And then hopefully the last one, number 7 here, is we are still going to have to work through and have a great solution set for privileged access management. Just recently, inside of our experience center that we have at our organization, somebody realized that maybe Frank Welder should not be the global domain admin. I don't know. I was pretty upset when they took that away from me. But I was like, hey, but I still need to be able to do these types of things. I want to be able to still get access in and change that. I'm sure every organization operates in that same way, shape, or form. And so how do we help regulate that? What solution set do we put in place that takes advantage of all the 6 things above that we talked about it, to make sure we can continue to do that? Because IT is the lifeblood of an organization, right? If we can't get our IT to help support the business, our business isn't going to do very well. So if you're an IT geek like I came up in this world with, right, keep on doing it, right? But we got to figure out how PAM works, because as much as I hate to say it, we can't all be the administrators of this to get our job done. But sometimes we need administrative functionality. So that whole capability about being able to assign access, get them into an environment and out of an environment, and rotate the keys or the credentials automatically is absolutely going to be a critical component of our identity fabric as well. Okay. That's the landscape. There it is. I'm going to go to the next slides. I'm going to ask some pain questions. If you feel like answering them and throwing some stuff in the chat, I'm okay with that. But I want you to think about these things when it comes to your framework and your identity environment right now. I want you to think about, can you today easily automate that user journey, the workflow across multiple identity providers, directories, legacy apps, and make it frictionless? Be honest. And can you tie that into behavior analysis to detect if somebody was bypassing that or changing that? That's the question we're really trying to help organizations figure out, because we think you should absolutely be able to do that. And what we're talking about that is how we get governance with that in the most frictionless type possible and have view associated with it. Because this is going to help alleviate the workarounds. Oh, you know what? The IT says you have to do it this way, but I found that I can do it this way and they'll never know. And that all can, right? Which opens you up to bad things happening and then cyber insurance having to be invoked associated with that, as well as cleaning up stuff with that. So that's that first question. I really wanted to, can you do that? Can you help automate that thing? We, our experience is we can help in that particular one. Can you detect in real time threats to your identity and access management, such as MFA bypass? You'd be surprised, right? Oh, thou shalt use MFA. Oh, but here's the workaround, and I can get over that. And whether that's MFA and PAM or MFA for sensitive applications, we've seen this. Could you, and this goes back to that, I doubt, all right, the respec, which you can't inspect. How do you actually track if that's been happening? How do you track that MFA happened across multiple directories and multiple capabilities? How can you take a look at that? And our perspective from an IBM piece is I want to be able to like QRadar does, or an event log manager gives you visibility into how stuff is being used. I want to tie that in just for identity. And we'll do MFA bypass, but shadow assets. And we see this one a lot with, I don't know if you remember this, IBM kind of plunked down a couple of $1 billion, burning a hole in its pocket. And they bought this little organization called HashiCorp. And HashiCorp's got some fantastic technologies. But one of the things that many organizations that were using HashiCorp Vault, think about that thing that manages machine IDs and fuels the growth for Terraform, right? Terraform and Vault, they go hand in hand like peas and carrots, right? Was that they weren't able to find the shadow directories that Vault was sitting out there. And so one of the latest things that IBM included in one of its product sets was the ability to be able to find the shadow vaults sitting out there and now including and bringing them into management inside of the platform. So that's why I asked that one. So we use it for that one, but could you do it for other LDAP or to other IDPs that are sitting in your environment that are shadow assets associated with that? Because that is absolutely risk into your environment. Thirdly, can you provide a single point of view on who has access to what systems? Frank Welder has access into these things. This is his ID. This is how we tracked it. And this was his activity, or her. I'm still here. All right. This is the activity that he had during these dates and times associated with it. That's a challenge for many organizations because of OIDC and OAuth don't do back channel associated with that, right? For the reporting. Oh, I authenticated, you're good to go. Oh, come on, I need more than that, man. I need more than that with it. So how could you provide that single point of view with that? And then this goes back to the governance, onboard, offboard, or manage the identities associated with that. This sounds easy. It's easy to create a user, right? It really is if you have the right access. It's when you have to manage the identity. Let's say somebody moves from this department to this department. How do you change the groups and rights associated with that? We have, I don't want to tell any stories here, but I've worked with customers that have had people that move from operations to sales into different areas. And all of a sudden, they're in the sales area, they get access into the operations side. And there's this little thing on some of these regulations that talk about separation of duties, and that just got violated because that wasn't able to be managed or governed as part of that piece as well. So bad there as well. So that's that piece. So these are that 4 questions. Ask yourself these 4 questions because, quite frankly, I think Alex and I will be asking these as follow-ups as part of this as well. Can you? inquire, make sure that you're doing this, because this is the perspective that we show. Okay, I forgot about my cyber insurance guys again, right? I think I beat that horse. I hope that didn't come across offensively to my friends in Canada. It's just something we say. I grew up in North Dakota. I can't help myself some days. So let's take the big gobbledygook. At least I do my virtual whiteboard instead of writing on my board back here, because I have like doctor's handwriting. You couldn't read it anyway. So this is what we see as that simplified. There's no such thing as simple in identity, right? What that identity transformation looks like, right? Employee and consumer meeting in the identity, being able to do all of those 7 things we talked about, and tying it into your SOC, SIM, and remediation capabilities. What we're really saying is that if we can help you as part of this journey, we don't want to rip out what you're already doing. We want to be able to complement that, because changing the tire on the car while it's moving is very difficult, and people can get hurt doing it. And we don't want to see that happen. We want to help you understand that. We really want to help you simplify your identity and access environment. If you're a modern organization that also has legacy and cloud and has to put those things in, simplification and automation is going to help deliver a consistent service to your user environment. And then comprehensive coverage, right? Very consistent. I know that my roles are all over the place. My role-based access controls can now be consistent, as an example that ties with that. So this is how IBMs, all right, so now here comes the sales pitch. Look out, here it comes right here. This is the part that says, when we combine the workforce ID and the consumer ID, this is where we get the continuous access control piece. No matter where it's at, I'm going to be able to do cloud, legacy, right? So now, if I do that in IBM's vision, being able to tie it together under this thing called IBM Verify, you're going to get 6 core components associated with it. Single sign-on, adaptive access, passwordless authentication, so passkey, all those different things you can do. Lifecycle management, right? Moving them through cradle to grave as part of that. Privileged access, who can access what and track those things, as well as consent management, right? Privacy and consent management. That's a big thing on our consumer identity side, and that's where we see a lot of fines coming in with that one as well. So pay attention to that. So we think we could tie those 2 things together, and then the solution set that IBM has to enable those 6 key capabilities across those groups is we've got an access management piece, an identity governance piece, and a privileged access management piece. Now, depending on how they're deployed, it could be a SaaS solution, it could be an on-prem deployment, it could be a helper app into a Kubernetes. There's lots of different ways, and we can work out the GORPy stuff, but IBM, via the Verify product line, has millions, if not billions, of IDs under management that they're doing this with. I think here in the United States, where I focus on a lot, almost every Blue Cross and Blue Shield health organization uses IBM Verify to manage consumer and workforce associated with it. Big insurance organizations, State Farm and Progressive, are all users of these pieces of technology because it's that. But you know what? I don't want to forget about every other smaller organization that needs the same type capabilities, because they've got the same type workflows associated with it. So how it's implemented is just a difference in work effort and deployment. Capabilities are always there with that. And these are that capabilities, right? Tie that all together associated with it. So I think, I hope as part of our discussion, we've been able to paint a little bit of an understanding of the pain. We understand the pain that identity and access has for many organizations. We also understand there's a great solution set that could be out there, and the objectives that are driving it. And this is IBM's view of what this is. And as Alex said earlier, oh, you're not just going to slap something on top of Entra to make it happen. And I know you would never do that, right? But we think that this is an approach that we can help you investigate in your environments. So my whole goal is, what we see is that today's consumer and workforce environments have these things: fragmented identity directories. First and foremost, we see that everywhere. And because of that, inconsistent security policies and controls, and and then the other driver is abandoned legacy apps associated with that. We absolutely firmly believe that IBM's identity and access management controls and solution set will help be able to address this at the top level, but those 9 different capabilities with that. Alex, I want to thank you so much for bringing me along as part of your journey and your discussion today. I'm going to flip it back over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Frank. Okay. So we have a bit less than 5 minutes left, which is perfect. We're right on time. So from there, how do we get started? I will tell you these 6 words: think big, start small, scale fast. Um, Frank and I basically today showed you a bit the think big, which is the overall framework and concept. What I'm saying is you need to look at starting small. What does it mean starting small is we need to do like little step. We need to identify the journey. We need to identify the journey, identify the pain point, and build that. Uh, Typically, I mean, these type of projects, when I look at it, we try to bring each phase to a kind of, I'll call it 6 to 12 weeks time period for implementation. And from there, we can roll and roll and roll. It's not super difficult to deploy. And I'm actually working on many, many projects like that right now where we were able to start small and to scale fast. So what I will tell you is let's talk. If you have questions around the topic, if you're curious, I mean, I shared with you my Calendly. Feel free to reach out. It will be my pleasure to have a 30-minute conversation with you to discuss your specifics. And on that, Camilo, I will pass it back to you for. I think we're done.
We we are done. Just in case, thank you for that presentation. It was amazing. Well put together and well presented. So congrats to both of you, Frank and Alex. Maybe one question from the audience, if you have the answer in terms of integration and scalability. We have people here from the banking industry, among others. So they want to know how easily can Verify integrate with an existing IAM system, mobile apps, and APIs without duplicating identities or creating silos.
Frank, you want to take this one?
Well, I can't help myself, right? Those, thank you, right? So I'm going to switch into my consultant hat, right? Because it depends is the answer with this thing. So
Okay.
if we think about, right, I need to be able to handle an ID. So we have this person, and I've already got an IDP already sitting out there. But let's say I wanted to be able to extract that and say, and I want to apply that across multiple things, or I've got this ID in multiple areas with it. I need to first establish this is the big one. And if for IBM Verify, they call that the Verify Cloud Directory. And it'll pull from Entra or on-prem or SQL, however it is. And it'll put it up above here and synchronize it all over, but then say, okay, I'm going to let this person access applications via these devices or those devices. So and make it and go forward and then say this person has access to these applications or these capabilities, and I'm going to enforce privileged access or enforce different things with them. So it's never easy. And if anybody ever tells you it's easy, you know they're not telling you the truth, because everything is going to have a degree of pain associated with it. But being able to help you understand clearly a outcome that you want associated with that, and then being able to have the tools from an IBM perspective and the intellectual property from a partner perspective to bring that to fruition helps as part of that. Very rarely have I ever had to go into an environment and said, oh, I have to rip that out because we can't use it, right? That is not it. Usually it's via this level of integration, and yep, integration hurts all the time, right? But low code, pre-built libraries, I'm now able to say, oh, I know how to cook that one because I know the recipe for doing that. And here's what it is. And we've done that before. So it's not ever going to be easy. It starts with understanding the outcome associated with that and being able to integrate with what you already have. In the 18 years that I've been doing IBM Verify and identity and access management, I can't remember a single time that I've said, oh, we got to start over, right? Pull the pin and start over associated with that. Some are more difficult than others.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks. So I think that's covering the entire webinar for today. 12:45. That was great. So thank you everybody for being here, and we hope to have you in an upcoming webinar that we're gonna have in at another moment, but very likely soon. So stay tuned for more info, and thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Bye, guys.